Representative, if you have any opening remarks.
I think at this point in session, we have had so many opening remarks that I would be, I don't want to be that guy. So I think what I will just say is welcome everyone. And I'm looking forward to our conversation with the commissioner. Back to you, co-chair.
Thank you so much, Representative. Any opening remarks from our minority leaders? Good. Go right ahead, Representative.
Yes, thank you. And good to see everybody here from the usual contingent from DOT, including the commissioner, and look forward to hearing from you today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. Thank you all for coming, and we're very much looking forward to. We're going to try to limit our questions to 2 minutes tops. I know everyone's got other commitments and running around today, but Commissioner, welcome yet again, and the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. So I do have a brief presentation. I apologize in advance to Transportation Committee members who may have seen some of this. Let's do full screen. Okay, hopefully that's visible on your screens up there. Okay. And it's set to do the auto advance. So while I work on that, I'm going to introduce my team. So I'm Garrett Euclido. I'm the Commissioner of Transportation. And I have with me, Gary, do you want to introduce yourself?
Gary Pesco-Solido. I'm the Bureau Chief of Finance and Administration at DOT.
And joining us, we have several members of the DOT team who will be called up potentially at various points throughout the presentation. So for some reason, my computer is set to auto advance, so I'm going to try and are you able to see that adequately? Okay, so I'll do that, and then we can advance it that way. So I want to recap 2024. 2024 was a pretty productive year. It was our most productive year in terms of volume of work that was conducted on our state's roadways. But none of that would have happened without the support of the legislature to allow us to continue to hire and grow our workforce. So several years ago, before the federal government introduced the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, Governor Lamont proposed and the legislature supported our effort to increase our authorized headcount up to 3,567. So with that increased headcount, we were able to begin to do recruitment. So between July of 2022 and December of 2024, we onboarded over 1,000 new employees. And that does not include any promotions in place. We also, our most recent capital plan is at 16.27 billion. That's a 5-year document. It's updated every year. And in 2024, we paved 818 lane miles across our state. One of the priorities coming out of the legislature was wrong way detection systems. As of this moment, we have 151 wrong way detection systems installed throughout the state. Those were all installed last year. 46.5 miles of guide rail and 4,500 miles of pavement markings last year. While all the normal capital program was ongoing, we had 2 major incidents. We had the fire underneath the Fairfield Avenue Bridge in Norwalk, which resulted in I-95 being closed for a few days. We were able to get it reopened in just a short time frame and get the bridge rebuilt and opened already, so less than a year. We also had the severe flooding in August in the western and southwestern portion of Connecticut. You see some photos there of the damages. At this time, all bridges, state-owned bridges, are reopened. Some of them are temporary until we can build a permanent replacement, but every road was reopened to allow people to get back to their homes and businesses. So the governor's budget request before you has 1.5 billion in fiscal year 26 and 1.529 billion in fiscal year 27. It's actually slightly below the 24-25 numbers. It has an increase in the amount of resurfacing we're going to do on roadways. And it actually has the reason there's a reduction from the previous biennial budget is because we're reducing the amount of federal match we're requesting for the railroad side of the capital program. Because we've secured a large portion of those railroad grants already. So when we look at our capital program, these are the priorities we try to tackle and address. The first is always safety. Then we look at state of good repair. So when we are not a growing infrastructure state, we're not building greenfields, new highways. We are largely going through and taking existing assets and replacing them or repairing them. So our focus is using an asset management approach. What's the most cost-effective way to maintain our assets that are held on behalf of the taxpayers in a state of good repair to get the most out of each investment we make. Congestion is historically one of Connecticut's biggest problems on the transportation side. So what are we doing to address congestion? And how can we help drive down the travel times on the rail and the bus system and increase reliability of those systems, and incorporate active transportation considerations into all of our projects. And then while all of that's going on, we have some major programs and initiatives that we are looking into the future as to how we can address, such as major interstate connection points, which I'll talk about later in this presentation. So there on the screen, you see a few different numbers. So the line shows total funds. So total funds expended from 2014 to 2024, capital funds. And then what our capital plan is projecting as total funds. And then underneath that, with the bars, we are breaking it down into each year of expenditures, how much is focused on highway bridge, how much is focused on rail, and how much is focused on bus. We wanted to break it down by mode. So as you can see, the state has, over the past few years, seen a marked increase in total expenditures in the capital program at ConnDOT. One of the main issues is always federal funds. So this portion here is something I wanted to highlight. So the federal fiscal year obviously is a different fiscal year than the state one. So it runs October 1st to September 30th. And the federal surface transportation program is largely formula driven. So when the federal government passed the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, we generally knew coming out of that exactly how much we would receive each year of that 5-year bill. And it's broken down into 3 categories. There's federal highway, federal transit, and NHTSA, National Highway Traffic Safety. Those are formula funds that are driven to us at the state level. And there's many different subcategories underneath each of those. And there's a lot of restrictions on how those funds need to be used. But these are the total amounts for federal fiscal year 25. And then on a separate track, you have all the competitive discretionary grants that we've applied for and received. And that's a separate pot of money that is distinct from our formula funds that come to Connecticut. So this chart here shows some of the breakdown in federal funds and state funds from 2016 through 2024, and now what we expect the total amount to be in 2025. So as you can see, it used to be going back and forth between state and federal, largely on par with each other. The past several years, since the passage of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the amount of federal funds have increased. As a result, we've had to increase our state funds, which provide a match. But even with that match, it's still not enough to bring all of our assets into the condition that we're being asked to do. So that's where we've continued to increase our state funds proportionally to allow us to continue to do some of the large projects that are on the horizon for Connecticut. I mentioned discretionary grants. So here you see some of the discretionary grants that have been received by ConnDOT after passage of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. ConnDOT is a recipient of it's like $1.89 billion in discretionary grants. Amtrak has received $838 million for one bridge project over the Connecticut River near Old Saybrook. So all told, Connecticut has $2.7 billion so far in the 3 years of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Some of the major projects are on the screen there, but there's a whole host of other projects. On the railroad side, there was historic new level of investment for passenger railroad. It's called the Fed State Partnership for the Northeast Corridor. That's what FSP NEC stands for. So we received, in excess of, 1.45 billion just for passenger railroad on the Northeast Corridor, which for us runs from Greenwich to New Haven, as well as portions of the Hartford line fall under the category of the Northeast Corridor for Connecticut. It does not include our branch railroad commuter lines of the New Canaan, Danbury, or Waterbury, but it does include the main line from Greenwich to New Haven, as well as the line from New Haven to Springfield, as well as Amtrak's line from New Haven all the way to Boston. So a few highlights on the roadway and bridge side. So some major bridge projects underway. Just highlighting a few there. The Baldwin Bridge, the Barnum Bridge is going to be kicking off. East Haddam Swing Bridge will be completing very shortly. Exactly. The Gold Star Bridge is underway. And then we also have the Bissell Bridge and the Buckley Bridge here in Hartford. It's going to be have a major aesthetic improvements to it to have it be lit up and visible at nighttime. On the roadway side, probably all of you get stuck in one of these projects or another on your commutes up to Hartford, but East Line project is well underway. The 91-6, 91-15 project, every day you go through there, there's major changes. We have multiple trail projects. We have some other projects in design right now, such as hopefully begin Route 7 and 15 interchange, I-95 projects, Route 9 signal removal project, and Route 85 in Montville and Salem. We also have a huge portion of our program is dedicated to supporting municipalities. So the largest one of those is the Town Aid Road Program. That is currently $60 million a year in state support directly to municipalities with broad eligible uses. Half of it comes out of the STO bond program and half of it out of the general obligation bond program in the proposed budget. We do have several years now the community connectivity grant program. So these are grants up to $800,000 to local governments for safety projects to improve safety of pedestrians, bikers, anyone using the local roadways. And so far it's been $62 million invested in local projects. There is a current submission or notice of funding opportunity out there right now. And the deadline is May 21st of this year to get applications in for local governments who want to apply for this next round. With the legislature's support, we started a new program called the Transportation Rural Improvement Program, or TRIP. This is, I believe in the packet that OFA provided to you, there's a map showing which communities are eligible for TRIP, but is intended to provide rural communities with a grant program that kind of replicates the LOTCIP program, Local Transportation Capital Improvement Program. So we are finalizing scoring of applications now and should make those awards in the next few months. And then if funding is provided in the budget, we'll do another round of that as well for the next 2 years. LOTCIP is the other major program. So this is a fund swap program. So several years ago now, the councils of governments and the DOT worked with the municipalities and the legislature to do a fund swap. So instead of having federal funds go towards local projects, we instituted a swap where we would use state funds to do the local projects and federal funds to do the state projects because the difficulties of administering a federally funded project are immense, and many of the local communities and the council of governments did not want to have to deal with the federal red tape that came along with it. So this has been pretty successful. And so each year as the federal funds increase that we're swapping, we usually come back and request a slight increase in the state funded portion. So it's on par. So we're not ever shortchanging the local governments of any funding here. So this program continues to be very locally driven. The council of governments solicit and rank and prioritize their proposals, and then we make the awards and work with them to execute the projects. Similarly, the state local bridge program is state funding for local bridge projects. We have reopened this new round of solicitations that just opened April 1st. So this is a 50% match, 50% state funds, 50% local funds for local bridges. And then moving to the public transportation side. So on the New Haven line, this is where the largest portion of our rail funding is headed because we have a lot of old infrastructure here. So the Walk Bridge program is the Norwalk River Bridge. And that photo on the right is one of the pits that has been drilled for the shaft there. It is an immensely impressive project. And the goal is to complete that by the end of this decade. To have a functional movable bridge to allow maritime traffic as well as rail traffic to continue to proceed unimpeded. The TIME program is an effort to improve travel time reliability and speeds on the New Haven line from Greenwich to New Haven. The first portion of that is between Bridgeport and Stratford. So we did receive some federal funds for this. That will be hopefully breaking ground later this year. We are going to be replacing catenary structures, which are the electrical system that powers the trains. Building some new crossovers to allow trains to change tracks, replacing some bridges, non-movable bridges, we call them undergrade bridges, and rehabilitating and slightly adjusting the platforms for the Stratford station. We also need to do repairs to the Devon movable rail bridge in between Stratford and Milford. And then we also have to upgrade our network cable system and the power system along the entire New Haven line. On the Waterbury branch line, we have received federal funds to do new high-level boarding platforms at each of the Waterbury branch train stations. And we have funding to move the Naugatuck station from its current location to a new location in cooperation with the Borough of Naugatuck and do a new waiting room at the historic Waterbury train station. Hartford line, Windsor Lock Station is well underway in construction. And the rendering there shows what the ultimate project will look like. We will have some track outages starting this month to allow for accelerated construction on the station because we can't be building over moving trains. We have funding to advance the Enfield station, and we also have funding for some of the double tracking work we need to do on the Hartford line. And we also have some new rail cars. The first one should be arriving next year, late next year. So we're pretty excited. That's a rendering of what the rail cars will look like. The majority of these will be headed to the Hartford line because we're using pretty old equipment on the Hartford line. Additional trains left over after the Hartford line will be dedicated to some of the branch lines on Metro North. And the last portion of the rail side is Shoreline East. So while it's not ConnDOT's owned infrastructure, we are a participant in funding some of these projects. Due to federal law, we have to help pay for some of the infrastructure if we ever use any of the infrastructure. So because we run Shoreline East over this portion of track territory, we have to help pay for a portion of the Amtrak projects, the largest of which is the Connecticut River Bridge project, which you see the groundbreaking for there. On the bus side, the last year's budget had a historic investment in service. And so we continue to advance the mandates on bus electrification, as well as a new program to increase all of our bus stops where possible. And we did a microtransit grant program providing service where there currently is no fixed route. And we're trying to upgrade the technology on the buses to allow an easier way to pay for your bus fare. This is just a summary of some other facility projects. So we're replacing the roof at CT Transit's Hartford facility, building a new bus storage facility in Stamford, a new facility for Greater New Haven Transit District, a bus rapid transit system in the New Haven, West Haven, and Hamden area, a new bus facility in Preston for SEAT, a new bus facility in Mansfield for Wyndham Regional Transit, and the bus stop enhancement program that I mentioned. And closing on some of our mega projects. So these are projects in the future that we are continuing to develop. So the largest of which I've talked to you about before is the Greater Hartford Mobility Program. This is a project to look at the I-84 and I-91 interchange project. We've received funds to advance the planning and the environmental work on this project. All told, it's about a 30-year project, totaling around $15 billion. So it's a multi-decade project, but the viaduct that carries I-84 needs to come down one way or the other, as I've said before. And so this is a long time coming, but we're finally at the point where we are advancing it into the environmental stage of determining the path forward. We completed the study and now we advance it into the next phase. Same thing in Waterbury, I-84 and Route 8. A similar generation as the Hartford project. This one also needs to be, we bought ourselves around 20 years worth of time with the most recent rehabilitation, but we'll need to unstack these highways to advance this project. Gold Star Bridge, that project is already underway, but it's currently the Gold Star Bridge is isn't able to carry permitted loads, so oversized, overweight vehicles can't pass over it, and they have a large detour. Often have to go up to the Haddam Swing Bridge. So we'd like to not have that happen anymore. And so this way, we're going to rehabilitate these structures to allow oversized, overweight vehicles and extend the useful life. The Walk Bridge project I talked about previously, that is a rendering of what it will ultimately look like. And then there are other major studies underway as to the future of our interstate highway system in Connecticut, including in Danbury, in Stamford on I-95, in Greenwich on I-95, Fairfield and Bridgeport portion of I-95, and I-95 from Branford to the Rhode Island state line. All those studies are underway, and we've been having public involvement sessions on those. And this was one question that I know came up, which is how we have our special tax obligation bond balances. So, generally, CONDOT will have a large unallotted and unallocated funds. That's because in order to proceed with the project and to go out to bid for a project, we generally need the funds. We need the bond commission to allocate those funds before we'll go out to the market and solicit bids for a project. So as some projects may take 5 to 10 years for full completion, the bond commission will allocate the funds, but we will allot those when the time's needed, and the treasurer will not go sell those bonds until the funds are needed in the STO program. And that concludes the presentation, and happy to take any questions you may have. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Commissioner, yet again for very thorough presentation. For the record, I got stuck in some of that traffic oftentimes. I don't mind because I know there's good work being done, and eventually it'll get better. But great job. Thank you so much. I have a two-part question. I'll get us started on the wrong way detection systems and the asset management approach you mentioned at the top of your presentation. First, thank you for doing that work. We've all been reading and hearing through the years about some of the wrong way driving accidents that we've seen. Could you give me a sense of what the next tranche of the work is going to be done there, and what are any metrics or data you're using to make those decisions?
So I'm going to call up Paul Rizzo, our Bureau Chief of Highway Operations. His bureau is the lead on this project. So
Okay.
You can introduce yourself, Paul.
Good afternoon, Paul Rizzo, Bureau Chief of Highway Operations. Thank you for the question. So currently, we have, as the commissioner stated, 151 sites that are active. Out of those 151, we've had 388 activations, and 316 of those have self-corrected. So the systems we have working right now are about an 82% success rate. We are currently into phase 2. where we're doing the groundwork on installation for the next sites. We work closely with our engineering construction. So we have simultaneous projects going on across the state in all 4 districts to increase the number of sites.
Thank you for that answer. In terms of the next phase of the work you're doing, is there any data guiding the decision-making as to where these wrong-way detection systems go? Is it areas where we know there have been accidents, wrong-way accidents, for instance, or a high level degree of accidents? Is there any kind of metric you're using to make these decisions, or is it more of a different approach taken?
Yes, thank you again for that question. So they use a number of different things, like if there's a liquor establishment, bar, restaurant kind of thing close to the highway ramp. The configuration of the ramps is taken into consideration. Many of our ramps in Connecticut are side by side. And we have data of either 911 calls or where police have received, calls for wrong way drivers. So they take all those and they've rated all the ramps. And the initial was 236 high-risk ramps, and that's where we began. So at the next set is after those 236, the next set of high-risk ramps using that same criteria, and we're going along, hitting each one of those, and that'll be our approach as we go forward to address all these ramps.
Got it. Thank you so much for expounding. Thank you for the work you guys are doing on this. I know, like a lot of us, horrifies us and saddens us to hear of when these things happen. So I'm glad that it's working, glad that there's more work happening on it, and hopefully we can save some lives. The second part of my question is, you had mentioned at the top of your presentation, Commissioner, about an asset management approach, about no new infrastructure projects. And I was wondering if you feel comfortable, if you could give us your view on whether you think the state of Connecticut should be looking at new infrastructure, big projects instead of more of the approach you're taking, which is understandable.
So I don't really think we have a need to do large scale expansions anywhere. Our population is not growing like compared to Texas or Florida, right? And so I think we are in a good place with the footprint of our infrastructure. Just the need to maintain the existing infrastructure we have is going to stress the limits of our state's ability to manage those projects. The amount of work that we have in our capital plan is historic in terms of the amount of investment we need to make to address all the infrastructure that was built in the 50s and 60s and is now coming up for renewal. Plus all the other infrastructure like the railroads, where we're looking at $12 to $15 billion worth of work we need to do on the railroad side, because that was from the 1880s to 1900. So, I think we maintaining the systems we have and the way that our team has pivoted to, we're no longer taking our assets and letting it get into the worst condition possible and then go in and replace it. We're instead using an approach that asset management life cycle, where we are going in and doing repairs to it to keep it another 20 years. And so the way we have an entire asset management team that has built in those metrics to determine when's the appropriate time to be making these investments on a bridge on Route 8, to make sure that we extend the life of it before we have to come in and fully replace it. And so we're able to take that asset and extend it another 40 years before it has to be completely replaced, versus wait 10 years until it's in a really poor condition and it has to be completely replaced. So we get another few decades out of the asset with a little bit of investment versus a full replacement. And I think that the approach our chief engineer, Jim Fallon's here, and our previous chief engineers who initiated that, it's really enabled us to stretch our dollars a lot further, and brought actually in the slide deck I'll send out to all of you after this meeting, I have a backup slide that shows the condition of our bridges, and we've made significant progress in bringing our bridge conditions down to around a 5 or 6% of our bridges in poor condition, which previously it was well in excess of 10%. So we're bringing our bridges into a better condition and extending the life of them by doing some repairs, things like putting coatings over the bridges to avoid rust, things like that, and some of our ultra high performance concrete on bridge ends to avoid deterioration of our bridge ends. And I'm not an engineer, so our engineer can probably explain it, but I think the approach we've taken is the appropriate one given the demands on our infrastructure, given the age of our infrastructure.
Thank you for that answer. I appreciate it. We'll move into questions from the committee. Madam Clerk, I don't have my laptop in front of me, so if you see someone online, raise your hand. Oh, you do. Great. So Representative, I think has a question.
Madam Chair, are you gonna ask anything?
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay, Mr. Chair. Okay, so I know that we have this time limitation. So I have 3 questions for you, and I'm going to start the clock. I hope you're ready for the speed round. Are you ready? Because there are 3 very different questions. First of all, and this will take no time at all, we have a lot of new members on both the Finance and Transportation Committee. Can you speak a little bit to the process for deciding how something ends up in the capital plan?
Yeah, so it's through local input and through our engineers. So it comes from a few different places. Either local governments work through their Council of Governments and elevate their project up through their TIP called the Transportation Improvement Plan. Or it comes from our engineers identifying a state asset that is in need of repairs and replacement. And so it's updated every single year. We have a public information session on the capital plan to provide input to us, but also comes from legislators working with their local governments. But generally, everything that's done has local input because local MPOs, Metropolitan Planning Organizations, have to vote to allocate federal funds to a project. So everything we do is a partnership with local governments and the state DOT.
In record time. Thank you very much. Jumping to freight rail. We talked a lot in the beginning of the transportation session about prioritizing freight rail for all of the benefits that it could bring to the state. Can you speak a little bit about the 20 million that you have allocated, why and how it is this way this year?
Sure. So we currently have a solicitation out on the street right now for our current round of freight rail investments. We do believe that investing in our freight rail system is critical. It helps take a lot of freight traffic off of our highway system. As we've moved towards an on-demand economy, we've seen freight traffic on the roadways increase substantially. And so if there are assets or commodities that can be moved to the rail system, it'll free up space for other on-demand economy items on the roadways. So we think doing 10 million a year will allow our staff the ability to continue to do that investment. So our request in front of you is, in addition to the round of funding we have out there right now, which closes May 30th, 10 million each additional year in this next biennium will allow us to keep investing in that freight asset, which some of is owned by the state, but leased to these freight operators, and other infrastructure is owned directly by the freight operators.
Another excellent, to the point, and quick answer. Thank you for that one. And jumping now to LOTSIP, and then I promise I'm done and we're going to turn this over. You talked about LOTSIP speeding up local projects. Can you speak a little bit to how moving that into the local space frees up more time to address the federally funded projects a little more quickly? Because I know we have discussed how that has been a frustration in the past. We've talked to our congressional representatives about some of the issues there. So can you talk a little bit about how that has helped?
Yeah, so dealing with the federal programs, it gets pretty complicated. There's a lot more oversight and auditing required at the federal level. You have to use access of specific grant program or grant systems that locals don't have experience with, but our staff at CONDOT does have experience because every day our finance staff are processing dozens upon dozens of transactions in the system called FEMIS. It's the federal financial system that we deal with at USDOT. So by moving projects to state funds, it frees up a lot of time on the part of our fiscal staff to address the federal funds at their level, process things more quickly, we work directly with the federal division office here in Hartford. And then our engineers, we still have engineers dedicated to working with locals through the LOTSIP program, but it's not as many as we would need to if we had to work with the locals and have them administer a federal program. The councils of governments don't have enough staff at their level to help deal with a federal project at the local level. So this way, it's allocating the staff resources most appropriately to allow us to work with the COG and with the locals with a smaller number of engineers and allow our engineers to focus on the larger federal funded projects at our level. And then our fiscal people work at their level through the FEMA system with federal highways.
Thank you for that. Obviously, all of this will have to be revisited if we have any significant changes to the way that we are funded by the federal government. And I'm going to use if just because I'm feeling in an optimistic mood. But I appreciate all of that. Thank you very much. I will end my line of questioning for now, but I'm pretty sure that this incredible group of colleagues will probably hit on most of what we need. So I thank you very much, and thanks to everyone who is there to support you as well. I appreciate all of your openness, your willingness to answer some difficult questions at times, but also the fact that you're all so knowledgeable and ready to do what you got to do. I'm really grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Representative?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want to say thank you for the rapid progress on the Windsor Locks new train station. It has been a long haul, and we're going into an important new phase. So it's going to be an interesting few months, but very happy with the progress. On the subject of rail, I'm also concerned about freight rail. I think it's an underused asset here. But when you talk to the freight rail companies, they seem to think that the major sticking point right now is going through Hartford, the Hartford Viaduct area. And that seems to be a problem that will eclipse some of the funding that's already allocated. Does the state have plans on dealing with that directly, or is that something that you're expecting the independent rail companies to deal with?
So it is part of the greater Hartford Mobility Program, is we will need to address all of the rail infrastructure and highway infrastructure in Hartford. So as part of our looking at some of our alternatives that we've looked at for I-84 and I-91, it would entail shifting a portion of the highway and having to also shift portions of the railroad. So there will be needs to address the rail infrastructure, largely the Amtrak portion, the passenger rail infrastructure. Currently, as you know, the viaduct portion of the railroad is single tracked into Hartford Station. That's going to have to be addressed. Our proposal is going to look at options to potentially move the railroad tracks and the station itself to allow passing through there, multi-track opportunity through that new station so that freight is not impeded and passenger trains are not impeded. So there could be multiple train boarding, a train passing by all at the same time as you would have in any other large junction station, if you will.
Yeah, thank you for that. That is quite the major project. One additional short question. There's about $10 million left in the STO balance for Service Plaza improvements. What are the plans for the funds that are currently available? Do you have any repurposing for them, or are you planning on? I'm not sure that you really need a whole lot of additional improvements at the existing plazas.
So we are finalizing we're working with the Attorney General's office on finalizing a grant agreement document between us and the Service Plaza operator. So it's intended to go towards some capital improvements at those service plazas that exist today. We're just finalizing final signature Attorney General's office review on the grant agreement document. This was something from Governor's office initiative a few sessions ago. And so we finally reached the point. There's been a change in ownership of the service plazas to now it's owned by Applegreen as the major owner that works directly with us. So we're just finalizing that. So that you should see that fully expended within the next 12 months.
I was kind of hoping you were going to say something about making some improvements to the rest stops on I-91 and I-84. But anyway, thank you for your answer, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. Senator Huang.
Thank you for expediency. Welcome, Commissioner. I'll just reserve 2 questions, and if there's time to come around, I'd be happy to ask more. On a broad analysis, how comfortable are you in reconciling the fact that our unallocated balance as of April 1st is, I'm looking at the notes here, whatever the number was unallocated, but nevertheless, you have the allocation from the governor's fiscal year of 26 and 27 to be about 1.5. Now, from a standpoint of question, do you anticipate keeping up with this level of capital spending? Because in the past biennial, we had the capital spending, but never used it. And one of the challenges I know from being the ranking on transportation is permitting questions, which you raised a bill and caught a lot of heat for, and staffing. So can you give us as a broader perspective and your confidence level that the unallocated can be reconciled with the fiscal year spending? And will you be able to spend it to make the necessary improvements?
Yeah, so we actually, so OPM currently is soliciting bond commission allocations from agencies on a quarterly basis. So we have submitted 1.1 billion in our most recent request to OPM. So that would essentially draw on almost all of the unallocated funds. And I will, so we have spent, so in 2024, we spent $2.1 billion. That's the most we've ever spent as an agency. So we are spending, and the chart I showed previously, in 2022, we spent 1.6, 2023, 1.87, 2024, 2.18. So the spend ratio is growing up significantly. So, you know, with the increase in funds from several years ago, it's taken time to design a lot of those projects. Now these projects are in construction. And so now we've finally reached the point where we're beginning to spend the dollars that we've talked about for the past decade of doing in this state. All these projects we highlighted were projects I remember the previous administration talked about wanting to do some of these projects. And because of the support of this governor and the legislature giving the authorizations for these fund allocations, and then the bond commission acting and providing the allocations, we're actually able to do these projects now. So I'm very confident we'll be able to do this. I think the biggest part is going to be, you know, making sure that we continue to partner with the construction industry, make sure that the contractors are able to, you know, be able to meet the demands of our agency and every other state DOT in the country, which has historic levels of investment. So we're working really closely on workforce development issues too, to make sure the workforce is there when we need it.
And one of the compliments I want to offer to you is the fact that I guarantee you won't be the last will be asked of the impact on the federal funding uncertainty moving forward. But as a big compliment to you and your insight that many of the grants and many of the construction projects you talked about were years in the making, and many of the RFPs were submitted before the prior administration changed over. So that funding is in place for those projects to begin. And I want to give you a big shout out for having that insight to be able to provide that kind of stability. On that same vein, though, where do you see past the 27 biannual where we are? We had some uncertainty in regards to the funding and bonding mechanism with revenue sources that would be available to provide for that. As you articulated, these construction projects don't take months or years. They may even take decades. So where do you see in the confidence level you have for the funding consistency, whether it's a new administration in the federal or state level, where do you have the confidence that this kind of special transportation funding will be maintained as a commitment to our infrastructure?
No, I appreciate the question. So the current U.S. Department of Transportation has not slowed down any efforts in investment infrastructure. I will say that they currently, there were over 3,000 grants left when the new administration came into office that were unsigned, right? So they were awarded to states like Connecticut, but they weren't yet signed. And that's because I think it took a while for the previous administration to get the money out the door. So the last year had a lot of money being awarded to states, including Connecticut. And so they are working mightily to try and get more money out the door of USDOT into the hands of state DOTs, local governments, Amtrak. So I'm confident that's going to continue. The way the federal transportation program works is it's a 5-year bill. So then it expires in November of 2026. So Congress will need to act to either extend the current bill or pass a new bill. The leadership of the House of Representatives Transportation Committee, Representative Graves, he is focused on trying to make sure that he gets a bill passed while he's still chair of that committee. And so they've already started that effort. They've opened up dialogue with states and with other interested parties to solicit ideas as to what should be in the next bill. I'm hopeful that it will be at the previous levels of funding, if not more, at least adjusted for inflation. But we can never know until we see, because the same thing happening in Connecticut is happening in DC, where they don't have a viable long-term revenue stream to support their transportation. They have not adjusted the gas tax since the 90s. So they've been taking money from the general fund and putting it into the highway trust fund to pay for infrastructure. Similar to what Connecticut's situation is, where we've been using sales and use tax to pay for our special transportation fund because our gas tax hasn't been increased since it was lowered in 2002, I think. That's the same thing the federal government's facing is what Connecticut's facing. In the next few years, will probably the next biennial budget, Connecticut will have to address how are we going to pay for infrastructure, transportation infrastructure moving forward? What revenue streams do we want to support that? And so that's the same thing the federal government's going to have to face.
Well, I appreciate that, and that was unfortunately not the result I wanted to hear, but it brings to light some of the challenges we have moving forward. With the indulgence, Chair, the second question is the fact that I'm in the unique position of sitting as the ranking member on both subcommittees, general obligation and the transportation. What's unique this year that I find surprising is the town aid funds. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, normally it's from an appropriations allocation to our municipalities. You've now created a unique situation where it's a combination of transportation and general obligation bonds. Why not just all into special transportation fund or general obligation? Could you explain the rationale split between the two bonding allocations and the rationale for moving away from our appropriation allocation to bonding? Because I think a lot of my municipalities will be a little bit surprised of this kind of evolution, because there's a different path from what it's been usual.
So historically, it's actually traditionally been bonding. Historically, it was either STO bonding and GO bonding. It was only in the most recent past that we moved towards appropriations. I don't know if you want to add to that, but yeah, so we can get you the breakdown, but historically it used to be bonding. Within the most recent past, when there was a large surplus in the STF, the legislature and the governor moved it into appropriations. And then now it's back split, half in the general obligation, half in the STO. In our position, in our opinion, like it could be either. It is capital investment, so it is completely aligned with the bonding, the STO bonding program in terms of the purposes. And one of the good things that was done several years ago is there's now a reporting requirement. So municipalities are now reporting to CONDOT on the use of those funds. So if there ever is a question as to how those funds are being used, we're able to show, and the evidence is clear, that it's largely heavily weighted towards actual capital investment, because there was a question of how are municipalities using it? Are they using it for operations? Or are they using it for actually building things? And the evidence shows it's going towards resurfacing and building on the local roads. So yeah, I think from our perspective, we're agnostic, but it certainly meets the definition of a capital bonded investment.
I appreciate that clarification, and I think maybe for simplicity's sakes, I didn't realize it was split until today. Well, I knew it after doing my homework, but I think agnostically, just all of it in one makes it a whole lot easier for tracking. But nevertheless, that's my thought. But thank you, Mr. Chair, for the 2 questions. Thank you, as always, Mr. Commissioner, and to all of your staff for their quality and responsive work on behalf of the DOT. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Reyes, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Commissioner. I do have 2 quick questions, and in the waterway rail line, I would like to see if we can set aside a meeting with the waterway delegation on the exact timeline of the expansion for the commuters to be able to be inside that station. We've been talking about that for quite some time now, and just are we really close to doing something there? If you can talk about it, great. But I do want to meet the waterway delegation on that.
Happy to do a meeting. We can show you some of the designs. We are breaking ground on that. Or not actually breaking ground, but we're starting construction on the interior this fall. So
Thank you, Commissioner. That's awesome. And Mr. Chair, then the Riverwalk, along the South Main Street corridor that we've talked about. I was just there Sunday. I do my walks there, and the commentary for a lot of people says it's painfully becoming more obvious that we really need to address a barrier. And my question for you is, some of the trees have been damaged and so forth. Could we get the state to take another look at what's going on down there right now?
yeah, I'd love to do a meeting with you and the city to talk through. We can meet on site with the city leadership, Public Works or someone else to talk through what we provided them with potential options for vegetative barriers there to make it so that people can't pull up and park on the grass swale. So we can walk through that with you and the city there, because I think there are options there.
And are there pockets that the state would still consider putting up physical barriers other than trees or specimens?
Generally, we don't like physical barriers near moving vehicles, because if a vehicle does go through that physical barrier, either splinters will fly and potentially hurt innocent bystanders. That's generally the concern with that, but we can bring one of the traffic engineers on site with us to talk through that.
Thank you, Commissioner. And Mr. Chair, if you allow me, just real quickly. So so let's talk about I-84 traveling west from the East Main Street corridor. I know that the sunlight is a big problem traveling west in the evening. What are the plans as far as expanding further down past exit 17 as we're traveling west? So we're in Middlebury going out. Is that in the near future?
Right now, there is no, Middlebury West, there are currently no plans. The next piece of 84 that we wanted to address is Danbury, where significant congestion occurs. And then there is no current study underway for how to address any congestion that occurs from, let's say, Danbury to Middlebury. We're hopeful that the work done in Waterbury and the work done in Danbury may disperse some of that congestion. So we want to get through move the project in Waterbury into actual design first, and then move the project in Danbury into design. And then that will free up space for our planners to look at what other interstates through the state do we need to do a long-term study at.
Commissioner, I don't need an answer here. We can talk about it, but 84 traveling west between the Austin Road exit, and by the time we get downtown to Meadow Street, exit 21, which we eventually will close, there's still a jam up there every single day in rush hour. And it appears to me that we widened the road back up on the East Main corridor, on the east end corridor, but unfortunately, it funnels right back down to Meadow Street and it ties it all back up again. And like I said, we don't have to answer that here, but that we need to take up with the Waterbury delegation. Okay, thank you, Mr.
Yeah.
Chair.
I'll look into that.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Shannon, followed by Representative Farrar.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here, Commissioner. Just wanted to since getting in office, I've had a couple DOT things, and your staff has been very helpful with getting me answers for those. So thank you for that. Kind of just touched upon it with Rep. Reyes's questions. I had a question. If in the capital plans there were some plans to look at areas that are congestion hotspots and see what like you can do to alleviate some of that.
Yeah, I mean, so we have studies underway, as I mentioned, for various portions of I-95. So Fairfield Bridgeport portion, we have a study underway, Greenwich, Stamford. We've addressed the large portion of New Haven congestion that used to be in the previous decade. We have a project kicking off this week, actually, breaking ground in West Haven on the I-95 bridge that goes over the railroad. And that is where, when you're coming over the Q Bridge, the Pearl Harbor Memorial Bridge, heading westbound, you hit a bottleneck where traffic is essentially throttling back down. So we're hopeful that will help address congestion there. Our approach is largely, as we look at these longer term studies, we did years ago do a study. We broke the highways up into various portions of the state. So we looked at I-95 east of New Haven, which is currently in study right now. That's the Branford to Rhode Island border. We did I-95 west of New Haven, and that resulted in a large number of projects that are in construction now, including things that you see in Norwalk and Westport. And then, we've looked at Hartford, Waterbury, Danbury. So all of those are largely underway. The one thing I'll flag, though, is we can't really build our way out of congestion. Adding a lane to the highway won't really address congestion. So what we can do, though, is address some bottlenecks at specific exits, where if there's a ramp that has a short merge, and people have to merge really quickly when they get on the highway, or merge quickly to get off the highway, that's where we're doing things to try and address that. And so in Stamford right now, we have a ramp that we're extending as an acceleration lane to give people more time to merge onto the highway or merge off. And we're hopeful that will help alleviate some of that weaving that occurs that, we're never going to get rid of congestion in Connecticut, but what we can do is have predictable and reliable travel times. So when you leave your house, I should expect it's going to take this long to get to where I need to go. And so that's what we really strive for, is predictable and reliable trip times. And so that's really how we approach the planning process.
Thank you so much for that answer. So sad that we'll always have traffic here. One more question, if I may, Mr. Chair. It's not in my district specifically, but part of my community. I just would love to have an update on the Devon Bridge, if I can.
Yeah, I love the Devon Bridge. I'm going to ask our chief engineer to come up if he can. There's two different projects for the Devon Bridge.
Thank you, Gary. So I'm Jim Fallon, Chief Engineer at DOT. So Devon Bridge, we are scheduled to do some interim repairs. So that bridge has some structural issues, so we'll be starting that next year. And then we obviously have plans for doing some long-term improvements. That's going to take a number of years. I think we're targeting towards the end of the 2020s. That's a $2.5–3 billion program. So that has a number of environmental hurdles that we need to step through and things like that. But we do have, a conceptual alternative, and we'll be progressing that.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Farrar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, Commissioner. Hi to your team. Thanks for being here. I just wanted to say thank you and was glad to see the continued and request for authorization, of course, for the Community Connectivity Grant Program. And I look forward to our continued conversations on that. So thank you for that. And I'm excited for more communities to have that opportunity for those grants. But connected to that grant effort and Complete Streets, I know that the agency took on a new Complete Streets policy for your own capital projects. And I was hoping you could speak to how you view that fitting into the range of capital work you have going on.
So it has, when you look at our entire capital plan, the big projects that get the most attention are the interstate highway projects. But a large portion of our capital plan is, what we'll call secondary roads in local communities. And that's where a large portion of it is this community complete streets directive is really taking effect. So as we're going into these communities to do rehabilitation of a roadway or a bridge, how can we incorporate sidewalks or wider shoulders to act as a bike lane or a buffered bike lane in those communities? It's led to a lot of conversations with local governments, not all necessarily are looking forward to some of those projects advancing at this time. So it's a back and forth to see how can we adjust the project to meet the community's needs as well as the safety of all the users of the system. And so it's a learning experience for, I think, all the local governments, for the state DOT, for our engineers. Our team is focused on all the projects moving forward. Any project that was in design already or near completion of design was advancing, but we viewed some opportunities where there was a project, let's say, where there's a 10-foot gap in sidewalk, and we're going to be doing a roadway project there, and there's a bus stop in the location. Well, let's fill in that 10-foot gap to allow someone with a mobility impairment to be able to traverse from one end to the other bus stop. And so, that's something that I think our team at ConnDOT is really excited about, the opportunity to do that. I know we're having a public meeting coming up in Newington for a project to build some sidewalks to allow connectivity directly to one of our bus rapid transit stations. So, having the opportunity to educate as to the importance of this, why we're doing it. A lot of people don't necessarily realize, the legislature has passed some bills that we're trying to respond to, where there was a bill about bus stops and making sure all the bus stops in our state are ADA accessible. And so when we come in and look at a project, that's something we're looking to address. And sometimes that catches people off guard. I thought you're just doing a road project. Yes, but we also have to comply with this requirement that we need to make our bus stops ADA accessible, because as we see more people with mobility impairments using our transit system, even if it's only 15, 20 people a day using that stop, they still need to be able to safely traverse our systems.
Thank you, Commissioner, for giving a variety of examples of what you all are facing in those conversations. And I know in Newington, we look forward to having the DOT visit us soon for the sidewalk improvement. But to your point around those continued conversations with municipalities, I know in West Hartford, there was a road diet pursued on New Britain Avenue, I believe in line with this policy. And I think the community, including the business owners, were caught a little off guard. And so I just would continue to encourage your department to do as much initial outreach as possible. And I know as representatives and senators, we would be happy to be partners in that to keep educating people as soon as possible. And then secondly, my second question pivots a little bit to both planning that the department had taken on and potentially some of the federal impacts. I know the department had taken on an extensive plan in regards to EV charging infrastructure in the state. And I think there are a number of concerns of how we might implement that plan. And I'm curious if that's something you will be seeking further state bonding for, rather than being able to get the federal dollars.
Yeah, so there's a few different portions for electric vehicles. There's our facilities themselves, which we have state bond funds to invest in to ensure that we continue to meet the mandates for our fleet transition. But the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, or NEVI, is the federal funding program. Connecticut was provided with $52 million in federal funds. And these are intended to be private sector electric vehicle charging stations. We did do a solicitation. We made some awards. We were in the process of drafting grant agreements to the recipients of those funds when the Federal Highway Administration withdrew their guidance. And so while they did not canceled their guidance, they did tell us that they will issue new guidance either this spring or summer. So we're awaiting information from Federal Highway Administration on what their new guidance is around those NEVI funds. So until that new guidance comes down, we're kind of in a holding pattern. We're just, we're continuing to refine our grant agreements with the potential recipients of those funds. And we're not doing any more solicitation of projects until we get clarity there on how we can use those funds and what strings might be attached to them. So I think it's too early to say that we would need to come back and seek funds because, those were private sector charging sites. And so, we'd need to then, if that program is canceled, we'd want to have a conversation with Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, with the governor's office, with the legislature as to what's the state's priority for investing in EV charging infrastructure. Is it those private sector sites that we're using federal funds to invest in, or is it investing in the state assets and facilities that we want to do for our fleet? So that's a conversation that we'll want to wait and see what the guidance from the feds is before coming up with any potential conceptual proposals for you all.
Thank you for the update on this. I have definitely heard from a few constituents who were excited and anxious about having access to further charging infrastructure around the state. And therefore, I do hope if we aren't using these private sites and we look at state assets, it might be looking at our, improved visitor centers, that we have on site, something to really make sure that we're maximizing, as you said, what we might already have for state property. So thank you to the commissioner and thank you to the chair.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Turkle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you to the staff for DOT for being here. I wanted to ask a question regarding the statewide bus shelter improvement program. I've been very eager to get some of the bus shelters in Newington improved that I see, a large amount of residents used and exposed to the weather and sometimes unsafe conditions along a main road. And I'm really glad that we have this $4 million that's allocated towards this. The process seems to be frustratingly slow for some of my constituents that have been asking for this. We did follow up with CROG. Representative Farrar took the lead in talking with them. We did find out that, unfortunately, only one request from the town was approved. That was put on a priority list. The town is trying to find out why others they submitted weren't approved, but wanted to get some more clarity on that process, how the bus shelters are decided, and then how Newington can go about getting future bus shelters for later phases. Thank you.
Sure. I'll call up our Bureau Chief of Public Transportation. I will say, unfortunately, nothing is easy in infrastructure. We still have to deal with permitting, National Environmental Protection Act issues, Connecticut Environmental Policy Act, as well as historic preservation issues. So you would think that building a bus shelter would be easy, but we have every single environmental and historic preservation hurdle to jump through. No one's more frustrated than me. I will say that, but I'll let you talk about the program, Ben.
Yeah, I'm certainly the second most frustrated person. Ben Limmer, I am Chief of Transit for DOT. Good to see you all. Yeah, the process of identifying bus stops that meet certain criteria. We primarily look at ridership levels at that specific bus stop. We'll also look at surrounding land uses, whether or not there's a necessary community facility nearby, like a hospital, and such as that. So I can certainly look into which towns submitted within the CROG region and go from there. The good news is that we are launching a pilot program this summer where we will install about 50 bus shelters throughout the state. And then we are going to quickly transition into about 150 per year over the next several years. So there's going to be plenty of opportunity for the towns working with the COGS to, to put in for future bus shelters as part of this program.
Thank you very much for that feedback. That makes me hopeful that there'll be, after the pilot program, 150 a year. That sounds really great. So thank you for that. And for my second question, I've not been shy, Commissioner, about wanting the Hartford line train to stop, make it stop in Newington for residents to get on and off, but not just specifically the Newington. Could you provide or someone from your team, just a quick update on anything that's happening with adding more stops around that line? If there have been any decisions made on which stations would be next and what the timeline is looking for that. Thank you, Commissioner.
Absolutely. So the design continues for North Haven and West Hartford stations. So those designs, I believe, should be wrapping up later this year. We'll get you a specific update on both of those. For the Newington station, I heard that the town council might have voted to identify a preferred location. I haven't seen anything be submitted to me on that. So if the town could send me that, I'd appreciate that. And then we could we do have funds set aside for that design to initiate that design of that project. So once we have that in hand, then we can start discussions with the town of Newington about that potential site. In terms of construction phases, so we'll need to look at the what's called a force account. So any project you do on the railroad requires flaggers and safety and rail professionals from Amtrak to be on site for those projects. So after we finish Windsor Locks, next project is Enfield. And then we also have the double tracking project on the Hartford line. So once the double tracking project is completed and there's a bridge that needs to be built over the Connecticut River just south of Enfield, that bridge needs to be replaced Amtrak has received funds to do the preliminary engineering for that project. They don't have funding for construction for that yet. Once that's completed, then we can pivot to constructing additional stations on the Hartford line. So since it is owned by Amtrak, they dictate the priority of investment. Finishing the existing stations we have underway, double tracking is critical for us to increase the number of trains. Then it's the Conn River North Bridge, which is in desperate need of replacement. It's a single track bridge. And then we'll be able to pivot towards building the next stations on the Hartford line, which are still in our planning documents, and we'll have the designs ready. So we'll be able to quickly pivot to actually advancing those.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me the questions.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Haynes, followed by Representative Morinbello.
Hello, Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hello, Commissioner and et al. Appreciate you here. Just a couple of questions about local roads and things. Thank you for the shout out on that Swing Ridge. The sooner you guys get out of there, the better. No, but we appreciate all the work. And honestly, and I will say publicly that it's really been a wonderful partnership in a bad, terrible situation. We're getting there. It's almost there. And, again, appreciate you there, but at the same time, can't wait for you guys to go. But anyway, in regards to TAR, I was just curious as to, we've been asking you a lot of process questions. So there's another one. How is that calculated, and do you use miles of road, for example, in a town? I mean, we have 120 miles of worth of road miles that we have to maintain and keep up to date. So I kind of wanted to know, how do you calculate that?
It's the formula's in the statute, I believe. So Gary or Darren.
If you can just give me the statute, I'll read it. We don't have to spend time on it today. Yeah, just send it along and I'll take care.
Yeah, we'll send you along the statute for that, but there is a calculation that's based on improved and unimproved road miles in each town.
Okay.
It is broken down equitably based on exactly that per town. So we can get you the statute that does that, but it's a very straightforward calculation.
Perfect. All right, great. Then I will read all about it. And then my second question, another quick one, I hope, maintenance of the state roads within a rural town is, you guys are doing a lot. I get it. But at the same time, we have roads that were never maintained last year. And we've got a lot of tree damage, and the trees are finally getting there. But as a municipal leader, I worry. I drive up and down the roads and I'm like, not only are the grasses this high, but the trees are falling down on us. So I just kind of want to understand there's probably staffing, there's all kinds of reasons, but I still want to know, like, how do we call you guys and get you out there to get these things done?
So Paul Rizzo, do you want to come up and talk about maintenance, state roadways, secondary roads, how we allocate our staffing resources to address the vegetation and stuff?
Sure. Again, Paul Rizzo, Bureau Chief of Highway Operations. I oversee maintenance also of all of our state roads throughout Connecticut. So all the secondary roads that go through the towns, obviously, as a state road, we're responsible for all the maintenance of them. We have 48 maintenance facilities spread out across the state. Each facility has a designated area that they're responsible for, and they go through and prioritize, obviously, patching, litter, tree removal, guide rail repair, snow plowing, line painting, you name it, everything that has anything to do with maintaining those roads. We're out there, and they prioritize that, right? Safety is the number one priority. If it's a safety issue, they're going to address that first. We have, our funding that is spread out across the districts, and we're looking at, on our secondary roads, a lot of the roads that we haven't. It's been a long time that we've been trying to maintain our the trees, and some trees are, you have that overgrowth right over the roads. We're going through those roads, opening up, trying to create a clear zone, remove the dead, diseased, and dying trees. Over the years, Connecticut has been hit by, many of the insects that have devastated our trees. Our ash trees, our, the pine trees, a lot of insect damage. So we're methodically going through each area and trying to remove those dead, diseased, and dying, trying to open up, allow sunlight onto the roads, which helps us reduce the amount of salt we use in the winter. The roads dry quicker once the sun is is able to hit them and warm them up.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer. And I do appreciate that. I understand. And we're doing it on the town roads right next door to where you guys are working. So totally get that. And again, I do appreciate it. I know that there's different garages. As a matter of fact, my town is split between two different ones. And sometimes the response is great on one and some not so much. So I don't know whether there's a level of service that needs to be required of all those different garages, but I would hope that they could get equaled up a little bit, because it would help us on one side of town versus the other, because the other side is doing pretty good and the other side not so much. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much, and appreciate all you guys do. It's a lot, I know.
Thank you. And if you let us know, like, what areas you have concerns with,
sure,
we will definitely go out and take a look and see what we could do to even it out.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for being here again. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Representative. And the closer, Representative Morambello. No pressure.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the Commissioner for being here. I appreciate your presentation and all the information you've shared with us. I'm hoping you can just discuss a little bit more the EV initiatives that the DOT is continuing with, and what kind of collaboration we're seeing with the DOT and DEEP on some of these EV programs.
Yeah, so I'll start with our own DOT-owned facilities. So we have facilities at which our employees work out of, and there was the state law passed, I believe, 3 years ago now. I think it was the Connecticut Clean Air Act, I think. And so it mandated certain number of parking spaces have to have EV charging capability. And so we have advanced that initiative. Anytime we're going in and renovating a facility, we are instituting EV charging at that facility. And it's generally in accordance with DEEP's recommendations on parking at public facilities, how many spots are set aside, the type of charging. So we generally follow exactly what DEEP laid out in their guidebook for facilities. And so that's the both staffing side. We also have public facing areas like our service plazas on I-95, on Route 15, the Merritt Parkway, and on 395. Those are the only highway service plazas allowed to have commercial activity under federal law. And so those are privately run by a company called Apple Green, who has the concession through the state. And they have installed EV charging at most of those now. So there's public facing fast chargers at almost every single one of those. Initially, it was just Tesla charging. Now it's both Apple Green fast chargers as well as some Tesla fast chargers. So that's activated in almost every single one of those public facing service plazas. The rest areas are prohibited from having EV chargers under federal law. We could put them there, but we would have to let it be for free for everyone to charge there because you can't have any commercial activity at a rest area. So we have made the determination it's not really fiscally prudent for the state to put a fast charger in and pay the electricity costs for individuals to charge at our rest areas because people near exits nearby can develop the private facing EV charging gas station. And then the final piece is like the private sector EV charging, and so we continue to support DEEP on those efforts. We did have some federal funds that I mentioned, the NEVI funds. Currently, those funds are in limbo with federal guidance, re-looking at those, but we work really closely with DEEP on that. We also work with the Department of Administrative Services on the EV charging initiative because we have two different fleets that we manage. We have our fleet of vehicles, which have the license plates that start with a 2. And those are vehicles owned by the Connecticut Department of Transportation. It's largely the heavier pieces of equipment. And then we have some of the light duty vehicles that we lease from the Department of Administrative Services. And those we partner with DAS. We have a large number of EV vehicles now that we lease from DAS that are part of our motor pool fleet that people can reserve when they need to travel to different job sites. So we continue to increase the number of EVs available in our fleet each year. And build chargers, both level 2 chargers that are used for people to plug in when they bring their vehicle in at the end of their shift, plug it in. But we also have operated now some fast chargers that if we have someone out, going out all over the state to visit job sites, they need to stop and charge up quickly before they get back to the office. We now have a few key places with some fast chargers that are facing inwards for only DOT vehicles to use.
Thank you. No, thank you. I appreciate that answer and all of the information that it contained. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. So I was wrong. Senator Wong assures me that he's a Yankees fan, so that helps.
Absolutely,
So-
Yankees fan. But no, and Commissioner, I appreciate your time and indulgence, and thank you, Mr. Chair. I think your leadership and vision in regards to Vision Zero, roadway safety is unparalleled, and I think for us as a bipartisan committee and transportation has supported that. And I wanted to ask you in regards to the now called Community Connectivity and Mobility Program, which was the Bikeway initiative. Now, the governor, my compliments and gratitude to him for allocating the 15 million each year. You've allocated 62 million in the past. It's been fully subscribed. Can you elaborate a little bit more of that program, how it's changed from the previous Bikeway program? And that 15 million program is now taking applications. What are some of the requirements of that program? Does it need to be shovel ready? Does it need to have municipal governance approval for these kind of roadways? Or does it need to get confirmation and review of the project scale and scope acceptability by DOT? Could you elaborate a little bit more? Because I would venture to guess there are many municipalities that would like to be able to make that connectivity and mobility concern.
Thank you for the question. So we we've gone through several rounds now, so what we've learned from our experiences standing up the program. The first couple rounds, a lot of municipalities applied and they weren't necessarily ready to spend the money. And we know that, the legislature wants to see the money actually being spent. And the longer it takes for someone not to execute the project, the higher the costs are going to go, right? Over time, inflation. So we do have a few new requirements that we instituted the past couple of years, which is if you've previously been awarded a project, but you haven't actually completed the design, if you're not ready to finish your design on your first project that you got money for, you're not eligible to get another grant until you've at least finished your design and ready to go to construction in your first project. And that's kind of a carrot to encourage people, start spending the money that we awarded you the first time. But then the other piece is we have begun to award some bonus points in the scoring criteria for, do you have a complete streets policy at the local level or a complete streets plan? So there's some sort of plan behind your application instead of just say, I want to do this, and it's not rooted in any, plan for the rest of your community. So we want to see, it's a few additional bonus points there if you have one of those plans put in place that shows the trajectory for your community. We look at the reason we put that in place is some of the most successful communities we saw were like New Britain. They had the mayor there, she had a 10-year plan of investments for infrastructure that she wanted to make for sidewalks and bike lanes and crosswalks and roundabouts. And she kept biting off piece by piece by piece. And that was the most successful way to get the projects done. So in this case, we want to give bonus points to people that have a plan, a local capital plan rooted in complete streets policies that will help advance it. But it doesn't need to be shovel ready, but we at least want to see progress on the past projects that were awarded before you come in for a second round of awards. And we do have our engineers review it for readiness. We also have our engineers and planners review the cost estimates. So the municipalities will submit their proposed cost estimates. We oftentimes will go back and say, you are way underestimating how much it's going to be to execute this project. And, can you relook at this? Because we don't want to award a project and then have it not be able to be built.
That is helpful. And who would be the contact point for these kind of applications within your department?
So in our Bureau of Policy and Planning, our supervising, Assistant Planning Director, Craig Babowitz, and his information is on the website for people to contact him. He runs this program for us.
Would a program, I'll give you an example, would a program like a university that acquired an extension of a campus, working with 3 different municipalities and their respective COG, have submitted a roadway plan for sidewalks and mobility safety for students and pedestrians and bikeways to get from one campus to another when no sidewalks exist, no infrastructure. They've done the study work. Would they qualify for this kind of a mobility grant?
They would. The maximum amount we award is $800,000, so it's probably not enough to span the length that if you're talking about, it's going to traverse a few different municipalities. There's other potential grant opportunities. The LOTSIP program probably would be an eligible program. That's the one that the Council of Governments coordinate and score local priority projects, and those can be much higher dollar values. And then there's another one that's a federally driven program called the Transportation Alternatives Program. And that's where you see a lot of the trails projects, large sideway network projects, as well. So it's the TAP program. So that's where if the communities want to, if the COGs and want to sit down with us, we can walk through what potential funding sources might be viable for such a project. Especially if it's going to traverse multiple municipalities, I would think maybe LOTSIP or the TAP program would probably be a better funding opportunity for that. Because given the scale, I'm assuming it's going to be more than 800,000.
And I appreciate that. And thank you for the chair for the indulgence. I think it's key for us when we look at Vision Zero for pedestrian, bikeway and traffic safety and roadway safety. It is important to be able to work with you. And I want to appreciate and thanks for offering to be able to help us facilitate those Vision Zero tasks and roadway safety. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Senator. And my co-chair has one more question.
I'll lead with an apology, Senator Wong, because I am a Yankee fan, and I was absolutely mocking you for coming back on and asking another question. But your question brought me to another one. But it's really, really quick. One of the, and it's, you may not actually even have an answer to it because it's a concern that a lot of municipalities have is that to even be able to apply for these things, you need to have the design. And there is little to no funding available to help with the design. Is that something that you are cognizant of, something that you consider when you are putting these kinds of things together? Because for places that don't have an in-house design program, someone who can really put that together, the application process can't even begin.
Yes, though that's where we really want to work with our councils of governments and our MPOs. I mean, the majority of towns do have a town engineer or someone on staff that can help pull together a basic design. Or if not, if they're very small municipalities working with the COG, maybe there's some resources at the COG level that are available. You know, in the past, we did do the effort where we would help pay for some of the design, and those largely have been the projects that have not progressed. And so we pivoted to, we want to pay for the construction side, and we don't necessarily require a local match, right, in many of these. So that's where that investment in design is that local match. So, you know, there has to be some skin in the game. So if municipality can put up a portion of funding to hire a consultant to do the design, and then the state will help pay for the construction of the project. That's the way generally we approached it.
Appreciate that explanation, because I think there's a lot of confusion about how it feels like a boundary and a non-starter for many municipalities. So even to know that they can come and ask for assistance in getting started. I have definitely outlived my time here, so I'm going to turn this back over to my chair. Thank you very much for indulging me that last little moment.
Thank you, Representative. I don't see any other questions online. Thank you so much, Commissioner. Thank you to you and your team. I know that you are often navigating ever-changing landscape, and we appreciate your efforts on behalf of the state of Connecticut. Thank you for taking the time to walk us through, and thank you for answering our questions. And I know that your team and yourself will always be available to us. So thanks again. Next time and day of this next meeting will be determined. This meeting adjourned. Thank you.